Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm doing a short review of The Man Within by Greene. So this is the fifth Greene book that I've read. It is not on the top 1000 list by James Mustich, 1000 books to read before you die. But there are several Greene books on that list. One of them is The Power and the Glory, which I liked. The other books that I've read by Greene are Our Man in Havana, The Captain and the Enemy, and The Comedians. And I've liked all of the books by him that I've read. The Power and the Glory was my most recent read by Greene, and that book really kind of helped solidify my liking of Greene. I think he's just a good writer. He's not like one of the best writers in the world where I just fall in love with his books and fall in love with his stories and the settings and the plots and all that. I don't really know what makes him a good writer, but at the end of the day, I've enjoyed all of his books, so it's not books that I feel like I've wasted my time reading. So this was Greene's debut novel, The Man Within. So right now I'll just run through the plot. This will just be like stuff you'd find on the back of the book, so light spoilers. If you don't want to know that, if you don't want to know anything about the book, skip to the next chapter. So So the plot of this book is basically about this smuggler who rats his fellow associates out because he kind of wants to get out of the business. He never really wanted in the business. It was what his father did, and so he doesn't really want that life for himself. So he ratted his guys out, and the police showed up and someone got killed, and now the leader of the smugglers is trying to hunt this guy down. So the guy is on the run. He goes to this cabin and he meets this woman who tries to persuade him to go to the police and testify in court against the smugglers. And so the character of this guy is like he is a coward, so he's nervous about facing his enemies, kind of. He's nervous about just doing anything courageous. And so he has to decide what to do. Okay, so what to say about this book as far as my enjoyment of it? The first thing I noticed is that it definitely sounds like the work of a younger writer. By that, I mean there's a bit more overload of description as well as similes and metaphors. Greene divided his books into two categories. One I think was called literary, where it was like he was writing to try to do something serious novels. The others he called entertainments. And that's just like trying to, just have fun with his story. This is clearly his attempt, I think, to write a literary work where he's trying to impress critics or whoever with his writing, with his themes, and all of that. So, as a result, the book, it just kind of feels like it's trying too hard. It's trying to be like this great classic book. And I don't really think it is that. I mean, just the themes about it do not really come off very well. It just feels overdone, like the characters don't really feel real. And it's not like it's a bad book because of that, but it's just I think he's trying too hard to do too much. And for his debut novel, he doesn't have all the tools at his disposal to do that. I think you can see a lot of his skills and themes that he would later come to use, but for this, it's definitely still the work of a younger writer, and I think Greene himself wasn't really, I don't know how to say it, not proud of the book, but he knew the book had issues. And I knew that going in, since I picked this book because I knew it was his debut novel. I knew and expected it would be the work of a younger writer. And it was. So ultimately, that really doesn't affect my ranking or rating of the book because I knew the first books by writers tend to be not very good because they don't have all their tools at their disposal. They don't have all their talents yet. The main thing I'll say about serious drawbacks of the book is as I was reading this, I thought, this is just The Power and the Glory. I mean, it's the exact same story. So I guess right here I have to put moderate spoilers so far. So moderate spoilers. The characters are very similar. So they are both cowards who are fleeing from a threat. They're fleeing for their lives, basically. They each have like moral problems. So like for this guy, he kind of has weaknesses around like lust. So he lusts for women. And the priest in The Power and the Glory, he has a weakness to alcohol. So there's that. Both books also deal with religion. I think a lot of Graham Greene books do. So The Man Within, the woman whose house he goes to is a believer. She is religious. He is not. In The Power and the Glory, the protagonist is a priest. So again, both books have religious tones. While both men in both books are cowards, they are also fleeing from a character who is out to get them, who basically is a bad character. They're evil. They're the villain. So both characters are on the run from the villain. Also, in each book, the characters have to make a decision whether they will turn around and face their fears and face the villain, or whether they will continue to be cowards and just try to leave and just be selfish. Lastly, and I'll have to put major spoilers on here. So major spoilers. I mean, I will be spoiling both books. So major spoilers, if you don't want that, skip this part. Seriously, major spoilers. In The Power and the Glory, the priest decides to return to Mexico where he's trying to flee. And so the bad guy, the cop who is chasing him basically, captures him, and they wind up shooting the guy. They put him before the firing squad and they kill him. In this book, The Man Within, the protagonist decides to return to this cabin because the villain is makes a threat on the woman's life he likes. So he returns to the cabin to face the villain, and the woman gets murdered. Again, don't blame me. I said this is major spoilers. Or no, she actually kills herself. And so the protagonist decides that he will actually accept responsibility for her death. He will basically say that he murdered her because he wants the villain, the guy who's hunting him, the head of the smugglers, he kind of wants him to get away because of reasons, and also something to do with his father. He doesn't want to be the man his father was. So for some reason, he accepts the blame for this woman's murder. And so what he does is when the police arrive, the protagonist says, I killed her. It's my knife. I'm the one who did it. And so they take him away, presumably to hang him. So again, this guy dies in the end, just like Power and the Glory, where the priest gets executed. So very similar stories in that regard. Both pretty depressing endings. So when I was reading this book, The Man Within, I was just thinking, this is The Power and the Glory. This is the exact same book, really. I mean, it's the exact same message, exact same themes, exact same kind of protagonists and the characters of the protagonists and the villains and what they're trying to flee from and what they have to do in the end to face this evil and their outcome. It's just all very similar. These books are very similar. So I kind of thought when I was reading it, this is just a copy or a ripoff of The Power and the Glory. Of course, it can't be a ripoff of The Power and the Glory because he wrote that much later. So if anything, The Power and the Glory would be a ripoff of this book. So I don't quite know how to rank that exactly. In retrospect, if I was to read The Power and the Glory after reading this book, I'd probably not like it as much because I would think this is just a retelling of The Man Within. He's just redoing his story. And I think Graham Greene actually may have wanted to do that because I read something about how he chose not to edit this book years later because he understood that this was the work of a younger writer and he didn't want to destroy what he had done. And I find that very relatable myself. So basically what I think he may have done is he wrote The Power and the Glory just kind of taking his inspiration from this book, but thinking, okay, if I was to rewrite this book today with all of my writing ability that I have now, how would I do it? And so that led him to write The Power and the Glory. But what's also funny is I was reading reviews of this book, and at least one person said they thought this book was very similar to another Graham Greene book, Brighton Rock, which I have not read yet. So that is kind of becoming a concern to me that, it seems like Graham Greene may just be like repeating the same themes. All of his books kind of being just similar to each other, like the same plots, the same themes, and all that. So I don't know. I don't quite know what to make of that, but that is kind of a concern that, it's just like it's the same book. It's just done slightly different with new character names, maybe a new setting, and really the same book. But still, all that considered, when I think about all of the Graham Greene books that I've read, this one just really doesn't stand out to me. So even though it's his debut novel and that's cool, I just didn't really like it so much compared to the others. So I think it was my least favorite of the Graham Greene books that I've read so far. Maybe I would put it above the book, what is it, The Captain and the Enemy, just because I don't really remember that book too much as well. Maybe it'd also go above The Comedians. I don't know. I wasn't really too into that book as well. So I don't know. I think it would go more along those lines. Our Man in Havana would probably be second. And then I think my favorite still was The Power and the Glory. That is still, I think, my favorite Graham Greene book that I've read so far. But now knowing that it's kind of derivative of his older works, especially The Man Within, I don't know. Retroactively, I may give that book a downgrade. But anyway, that's not so important for this book video. For this book, I think I can only really justify giving it 3 stars. So, I mean, I liked it well enough. It's fine. It's a Graham Greene book. I knew what to expect for the writing. I knew Graham Greene wasn't like a spectacular writer who would blow me away, and I just love his plot and the story and all of that. I've never really felt that way for any Graham Greene book. But anyway, so in terms of writing, it's just okay. It's what I expected. It's Graham Greene, but it's also a younger Graham Greene. So overall, it's just okay, but not really like enough there that I think would be something I would recommend to anyone who isn't like a Graham Greene completionist. Like if you want to read every Graham Greene book, then of course you can read it, and I think it's fine. It's not a bad book at all. It's not a book I regretted reading. Or if you really want to start on a writer's first book, it's not bad. So it's not like I would tell people like, oh, go ahead and skip that book. So it's not one of those. It's a fine book. It's just not my favorite by him, and especially since it's so similar to The Power and the Glory, I was just kind of like, I've read this book. So if you've never read a Graham Greene book, I would still probably recommend Our Man in Havana or The Power and the Glory. Those are my 2 favorite books by him. I know a lot of people have also liked like Brighton Rock, so maybe you'll want to start out with that one if you see it. But anyway, if you want to start out with book 1, I think it's a perfectly fine book to begin with. But you have to know it is the work of a younger writer, a younger Graham Greene. So he's still learning about writing. He's still a bit overdone on like similes and metaphors and description and like describing every sunrise and all that. So he does go a bit overboard there, and he is a bit more long-winded or boring sometimes even. The plot can also sound like, I'm not even sure what time this comes from. So is this like the 1800s or 1850s or 1900? I can't really get a feel of the time frame of the book. But anyway, so that's also an issue. But the main thing I always think of when I read a book is, do I feel like I'm unhappy that I wasted my time reading this? No. The other main question I ask myself is, after reading this book, do I still want to read another book by the author? And I would still say yes. So I am still at this point a Graham Greene completionist. I have several books by him, and a couple of them are still on the top 1000 list. So I definitely plan to keep reading Graham Greene. Hopefully his second book, whichever book he wrote next. I don't know if I have it. I don't even know what his next book is. But ideally, that would be the next book I'd read, or it'd just be whichever next book he wrote that I have would be my next read. So either way, I'm still glad I read it. I am a Graham Greene completionist at this point. I would like to read all of his books. So that should hopefully tell you that this is an author I definitely like and respect. And it's weird because I can't really say why. At the end of the day, I just enjoy reading most of his books. So I think he's a good writer, or a good enough writer. And I think it's a fine read. Also, his books aren't long, just about, 190, 200, 240 pages or so. So it's not too long of a read, so that's good. Anyway, that is it for this review. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Bye.